Previously on Crank It. If you watched my latest video about only owning a motorcycle, you might have noticed a sneak peek of a bike that I haven't presented yet. So, internet, meet Fiona.
Fiona was originally a Kawasaki KLX450R, which is a street-legal enduro bike sold in Europe and Australia. That's why it has a license plate, a headlight and a rear taillight. The engine is a single-cylinder thumper, it outputs about 55 horsepower and it has a lot of torque as well. The weight sits at about 110 to 115 kilograms, somewhere in that ballpark. And it's a really fun machine. It's really fun when out on the road, but it's kind of shit. Why, you might ask?
Let's start at the front, where the suspension leaks more oil than a Harley does out of its engine. Also, while I already bought it with a Supermoto kit, the front wheel is only a 16.5 inch instead of a 17.
If you're not familiar with the 16.5 inch front diameter, this was a format used in racing back in the day. For example, the homologation special Ducati Desmosedici RR came with such a front tire, and it also got to be a pretty popular option between Supermoto conversions. The theory is that having a smaller inch diameter front tire should help with the bike turning and it should make it quicker to steer. Now in practice, I'm not sure how much of a difference I would feel. And the problem with this is that you basically can't find street legal tires for a 16.5 inch format. For example, the tires I have on this bike currently are some Pirelli race-oriented ones that have a big for competition use marking on the sides of them. They're not street legal and you would not be able to pass a technical inspection with a bike like this.
Don't worry, that's not it. The front brake desperately needs to have air taken out of the system, and also the front brake lever is broken. Okay, this might have been my fault, but still.
This bike does have a headlight, but at this point it's only really good for bird spotting on top of trees. Even if it adjusted all the way down, you still can't see anything out there on the road. Also, see this light switch over here. It does have a high beam and a horn button, but they work about as well as a person with Parkinson in a fine china factory. They don't. At least it's got a speedo, right?
Yes, it does have it. Nobody said it worked, so I could be going 50 or 20 or maybe 100. I don't know. At least that's mostly it, right? Who am I kidding? The plastics are pretty banged up. The clutch might need replacing fairly soon. The slip-on had a huge exhaust leak that made this bike go wild on popcorn every time you wanted to let off the gas. And also the rear brake, which it works, but it needs the weight of two average Americans applied to it before actually locking up the rear wheel, which not ideal for a Supermoto.
It has no rear license plate light, or running light for that matter. It probably needs a piston swap since it's never had one. The rear wheel is kind of too wide for this bike because someone thought it would look cool. And the side effect of that is that the rim itself got all munched up by the chain. And also this rear tire, it was really good at its age, but that was about 7 years ago. So now it's kind of crusty.
At this point, you might be asking why on earth would anyone buy this bike? And rightfully so.
these little drawbacks, this bike is just so much fun. It allows me to hoon anywhere I want. It's so agile, it's got so much low-end torque. It's incredible. It allows me to learn tricks like wheelies or whatever without having the fear of dropping it, which is honestly pretty amazing.
This is basically built on an enduro machine, so I know it's built to take some abuse. This is what makes it the perfect wheelie machine. Now, I don't really know how to wheelie. I've done more accidental wheelies than intentional ones, but the thing is, this bike in its first few gears will easily power wheelie, so you have to really be up on your toes whenever shooting for a fast gap in traffic. Ask me how I know this.
And then we get to the more objective good parts. This is a 450 with a reliable electric starter. That might not sound like much, but this is one amenity of a street bike that I don't really want to live without. And then we get to the front brakes. The bike already had aftermarket calipers, brake lines and master cylinder, and even in their current state, they stop on a dime. Once you get to the brake engagement point, you have to actually be careful of how much you pull back on that lever. Oh, and also it already has a really good, bigger front disc. These are pretty expensive parts that I am glad I got out of the box.
Also, yes, I did say my front suspension had a leak, but the internals have been changed to suit a more supermoto road riding style. And while talking about suspension, the rear shock was already swapped with an Öhlins unit that makes the bike behave really well out there on the road. The engine itself should be pretty reliable, I mean at least that's what the internet says, and it has a beautifully sounding Arrow slip-on exhaust. You see, in my country, any wheel size you want to have on a car and a bike has to be homologated. This bike originally came with big enduro wheels, but somehow managed to homologate 17-inch tires for this, which is great. So I do plan on selling my current supermoto set and then just buying a new fresh 17-inch one that should be perfectly street legal.
My point is, this is a really light, race-inspired machine. It has all the potential in the world, from having a powerful engine to being fully street legal. I do need to do some maintenance, sure, but in the grand scheme of things, this is actually not that bad.
A lot of the stuff that I iterated are really small things. I mean, the important bits that are actually quite expensive, like the front and rear suspension and the brakes, are already really high quality, and that's really important. And also, considering the price I paid for this, I paid around 3,400 euros, so that's really great for a bike like this with so many aftermarket components, considering what the price of something like the suspension would be usually.
During the winter, we're gonna do a little build series where we're gonna take this bike and restore it back to its former race-inspired street legal glory. So yeah, stay tuned for that and see you over the winter.